Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Colonel Frank Colley. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland, who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Thank you. If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Private Norman Nelson White. Norman White was born in 1890 in Woodstock, New South Wales, one of 9 children born to Edward and Ellen White. He received his education at the Woodstock Public School, where he was remembered as a popular student. He was well known in his hometown and in the local region as a prominent footballer in the Woodstock team. At the time of the outbreak of the war in 1914, White was working as a carter. Norman White enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 30th of March 1916. Assigned to the 45th Battalion, he embarked from Sydney aboard the troop ship Wiltshire in August that year. Private White arrived in England in October 1916. He was admitted to hospital in Woolwich with a case of the mumps on his arrival and spent the remainder of the year in hospital and in isolation in England, before joining his unit in France in January 1917. On arrival at the front, White was again taken ill and hospitalised again until May. The 45th Battalion was stationed in Belgium, around the Ypres sector on the Western Front for much of 1917. In June, White took part in his first major action of the war in the Battle of Messines. The Allied objective was to capture the German-occupied high ground along the Messines Ridge, which had been fortified with multiple defensive positions. The high ground also gave the enemy a strategic vantage point from which to observe the Allied lines. In the early hours of the morning on the 7th of June 1917, 19 mines laid beneath the German positions were detonated, signalling the beginning of the battle. The advancing troops were heavily shelled and targeted by fierce machine gun fire, but were successful in taking their objectives. By the 14th of June, Allied forces had taken control of the Messines Ridge. Capture of the ridge came at an enormous cost, however, with the Allies sustaining more than 25,000 casualties. Among them was Private Norman White. White was headed over the top with his comrades at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon when a shell burst nearby, critically wounding him. A fellow comrade recalled, "He was caught by a shell, and all he said after being hit was to ask his mate to shoot him and put him out of his agony." He was carried to a nearby dressing station by his comrades, where he quickly succumbed to his wounds. The battalion's chaplain wrote to White's parents to console them in their grief, saying, "I regret having to tell you the sad news of your son's death from wounds received in the Battle of Messines on June 7th. He was brought into the dressing station from the battlefield and given every possible attention, but he was badly wounded and rapidly weakened. I sat by him and comforted him all I could until he died. He was quite conscious and asked me to write to you. He said he was ready to go and was not a bit afraid. He was very brave and died peacefully in the shade of the big willow trees at the side of the river at the foot of Messines Hill." Please accept my deep sympathy in your great affliction, as I know what a terrible blow it must be to you, as he seemed such a fine fellow. After all, it is you parents who do most of the suffering in the war. It is you people in the homes who have the awful suspense of waiting and agony which is worse than any pain. May God give you strength to bear your burden and comfort you in the dark days. Another comrade of White's battalion described the young private as always smiling and noted he is missed by all the boys in C Company as he was such a fine little fellow. Norman White was 27 years old at the time of his death. He was buried in the Kandahar Farm Cemetery in Belgium, not far from where he fell. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Norman Nelson White, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrubber Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We particularly appreciate your visit despite the challenges posed by COVID and wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.